Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We are in the midst of free agency and the Olympics and trade rumor season and all that good stuff. So we got you covered on all the latest things happening around the NBA. Starting with, I think, some surprising news, Sap, that former Celtic and now former Oklahoma City Thunder member Kemba Walker has been bought out. A very short tenure with the Thunder. He gets bought out of his contract and heads to the New York Knicks. It's a homecoming for him. He's from New York. I honestly was surprised by this. The Thunder, rather, are a team that really maximizes every asset that they get. And to just buy out Kemba Walker, it seemed like they would have been able to rehab him like they have a couple other guys and then get value. But it also seemed like Kemba Walker had no interest in doing that. Were you surprised that he was bought out at all, Sap?
I was, especially that quickly. You thought maybe he could have started the season, proven that he was healthy again and borderline all-star player, and maybe he could work out better. But he seemed to have his heart set on playing with the New York Knicks, especially after the Knicks finishes the fourth seed in the recently completed playoffs. So I think that's where his heart and soul is. I mean, he's from New York, right? Won a national championship in Connecticut. His 2 years with the Celtics didn't go well. It's not the first player that it didn't go well in Boston, and probably won't be the last one that doesn't go well in Boston. But it was somewhat surprising that they were able to, he was able to do that so quickly. And now Oklahoma City gets to use his salary slot. I mean, you know that stuff way more than I do, but like, use it for what? I know they re-sign SGA, right? So he's going to be their building block. Yeah. I mean, you really a title contender with him as your best player? I don't think so. I think you're a title contender if he's your third best player. Are they going to be in the free agent market? We know they have a slew of draft picks going forward. They're going to have to get lucky and get a top, 3 or 4 pick at some point to try to get a great player or someone close to that can build that team.
Yeah, no, the Thunder, I mean, they're years and years away from being a competitive team, and I think they know that. And so Kemba Walker obviously wasn't in their immediate plans. But like you saw with Chris Paul and even to a lesser extent Al Horford, the veterans can play with young guys and rehab their value, and the Thunder have capitalized on that the past couple of years. They don't get to recoup the full salary slot, whatever Kemba was owed, whatever they gave out that counts against the cap. He just took a pay cut to get bought out.
Right.
So, they didn't have to pay whatever the full amount was. So the savings end up going to them, which, I think does beg the question, is that something the Celtics maybe should have considered doing? Now, maybe he wouldn't have taken a buyout from the Celtics because, it was a situation that was better than Oklahoma City for him. And he had friends on the team here and they could have at least, made a playoff run, unlike Oklahoma City. So maybe that wasn't even an option. But if it was, would you rather have, just paid Kemba the money, have it count against your cap, save a little bit, and then not had to have given out a pick? I guess that's sort of a dealer's choice sort of thing. We'll see in a couple of years if that 16th pick ended up amounting to anything. So maybe the Celtics made the right move in dumping him. But the real reason, Sap, that it surprised me is again because the Thunder are so asset oriented and gathering all these draft picks and all these assets to let Kemba Walker go for nothing. That is surprising. I mean, I guess it's good to have a good reputation amongst players, right? That you show deference towards them if they don't want to be there. You work with them to find something that's amenable for both sides. But at the same time, you are running a business and you're running a basketball team, and getting a little bit of financial relief. It seems like they could have gotten more for Kemba Walker had he played even a couple of weeks there and look good. But that's really why it surprised me. I don't think anybody thought he was there long term, but
no,
to get nothing for him is a little bit surprising.
Yeah, and it's not a surprise that he wanted to play for the Knicks. I mean, they've built a pretty good culture there. Today, they re-upped Julius Randle 4 years, $115 million, which seems to be a pretty good deal for the Knicks. It's an extension, so they'll have control over him for the next 5 years, but it's less than $30 million a year. This is a guy who was, I believe, second team All NBA, got
Yep.
MVP votes, did a really good job with the Knicks, but the Knicks are still miles away from contending in the Eastern Conference. They're not the Bucks. They're not the Nets. I think the Heat have a better squad than the Knicks. I think the Bulls may have a better squad than the Knicks going forward. And we'll see what happens with Philadelphia if they're able to execute a trade for Damian Lillard. The Knicks, they may have reached their apex last year by being the fourth seed and kind of a jumbled Eastern Conference. They look more like a 6 or 7 seed. But here's the thing, they're relevant again. And I think that this is what the Knicks have become, is they can't really be championship driven right now, but they want to be relevant. And, they're going to sell out Madison Square Garden. The celebrity's going to be there. They're going to be on ESPN or TNT a bunch of times. And that may be just good enough for them, that they're relevant again, right? So now you add Kemba Walker, who's a likable guy from New York originally, who can serve a purpose there. They signed Evan Fournier, 4 years, nearly $80 million, which I thought was excessive, but they're just cobbling together some of these assets so that they can be the 5th or 6th seed going forward. I don't see them as a viable championship contender, and they're using up a lot of their cap space to bring in these types of players. Next year, in theory, there's going to be some viable free agents out there, and they may not be able to get in play. But again, the frustrating part, Jed, about the NBA is when you look at all of the things that take place, it's almost like no one can explain why. And you are really good at that. You know this stuff. And even you can't get your head around, why did Oklahoma City do this? I mean, that's what makes the NBA somewhat frustrating. You almost have to be a capologist or a CFO or a controller to understand what the hell is going on. And then you always are talking about future draft picks. And it's kind of mind blowing that there's always these things being kicked around. And for the average fan, I think it's frustrating. And it almost seems like these general managers are just, pleasuring themselves with all these draft picks and tradable contracts and whatever else. It almost seems like a big game of nothing. And that can be frustrating if you're a fan of that particular team.
Yeah, I mean, in Oklahoma City, it's a tough market because it's so small. So you're not getting free agents to really ever come there. So everything you have to do is basically via trade or the draft. So that's where their mindset is now. In the short history of the franchise being in Oklahoma City, they've been pretty good because right when they moved, they drafted Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook the 2 years prior. And then they drafted James Harden.
Right.
So, they were good for a while because they had those high draft picks. And that's sort of, I think, the model they're trying to find again is they got to nail those high draft picks, have those young players under contract and see what goes from there. It's sort of the same thing I think the Pelicans are hoping to do in New Orleans, except for they seem to be kind of all over the place. We talked about this the other day. I don't think that they have a good plan. And it seems like the writing's on the wall that Zion is gone as soon as he has a chance to leave there. But as far as Oklahoma City, like I said, it's good to have a good reputation amongst the players, but for them, does it really matter all that much? Because again, free agents are going to sign there. So really, to me, I think what this comes down to is that they're not going to be competitive for a couple of years anyways. So the ownership looks at it as, all right, well, let's just save a little bit of money here. And I think, it's a dollars and cents move for Oklahoma City. They save a little bit of money. Doesn't really help them basketball wise, but since they're not ready to compete, I don't think ownership really cares about helping them basketball wise. So I look at it as that's the reason why. And as far as the Knicks go, I think it's a great move for the Knicks. I mean, Kemba Walker is not signing. I think it's an $8 million deal, not that much money. They'll be, like you said, relevant. They'll be on TV. I think that they probably max out as a second round exit team, but likely still a first round exit. I would think they'll be better than last year, but sometimes, you catch lightning in a bottle and you have great chemistry. And last year they won, I believe it was one game in the first round in this.
They lost in 5
set.
games to Atlanta. And I think Tom Thibodeau, as good a coach as he is, his act kind of wears thin after a while. So I think, maybe not next year, but the following year, players are just going to tune him out at some point. And, you're bringing Kemba Walker, who's not a good defensive player. Derrick Rose, not a good defensive player. Those are going to be your 2 point guards, essentially. So, they're going to have some shortcomings out there as well. But again, Kemba Walker's a fairly big name, right? Because he lit up Madison Square Garden in the Big East tournament back in 2011, a tournament that Connecticut had to win just to make it into March
Yep.
Madness, and then went ahead and won the national championship. That was an incredible run. Back to Oklahoma City for 1 second, Jed. Um, they had an opportunity to build a real dynasty, right? Because back to back years, they drafted Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, right? They
Yeah,
couldn't
it's
keep
it's
them
probably
together.
the greatest
It's got to be.
drafting
I mean,
accomplishment that I think that I can imagine in consecutive years.
yeah, because none of them were the first pick. I mean, Durant was the second pick. I think Westbrook was fourth or fifth, and Harden was fourth or fifth. I've kind of in a fog over those two, but they were both top five picks, but they weren't 1, 2, or 3. And you got 3 future Hall of Famers, 3
Right.
MVPs.
No, that's
Like,
incredible.
it's incredible, but they didn't keep it together. So even if they go ahead and pull that off again, which is not likely, what says they keep that group together? I mean, they got very little back in return for James Harden. They got nothing back in return for Kevin Durant, and they got very little in return. I mean, a slew of draft picks for Russell Westbrook. So, I mean, if I'm an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, I'm like, man, we had 3 great players here. We made it to the finals in 2011, and you couldn't keep it together over money. I mean, you should have made it work, and they weren't able to. I would lose total interest if I'm a fan of the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem with having that tiny market. And when they moved from
Right.
Seattle to Oklahoma City, I think a lot of people foresaw that becoming a problem. And had they remained in Seattle, I mean, obviously that's speculation. It's a bigger city
Mhm.
with a larger African American population, and just a more of a basketball culture there. Perhaps they keep it together, and perhaps
Yep.
they rip off a couple of championships. So, at the time, it seemed foolish to move from Seattle, which was an established market with great fans and stuff like that, and go to Oklahoma City. And it worked like gangbusters at first because they had these great players, but now that they're going to be in this perpetual rebuilding thing, I think you'll see the real dangers of having such a small market team. It's going to take them a long time to be able to build back something, and there's no guarantee that they do. So I do think that that move all these years later is going to come back to haunt Oklahoma City, as sometimes karma does get you, not immediately, but years later. That's sort of what happens. And Sap, so in talking about the Knicks, are they trying to do somewhat like emulate what the Nets did and become more of a stable franchise, and then attract some big free agents because of the stability, and then try to roll from there? Do you think that's the path they're following? Because if it is the path, they've missed one key cog, which is to make sure you have cap space available.
Right. That's the thing. I remember, was it 3 years ago they decided to sign like 7 power forwards? Seemed like they just
Yes.
continually signed
One of
power
them worked
forwards.
out. Randall
Yeah,
worked out
Julius
great.
Randle's
So
been outstanding, but they also didn't they sign Bobby Portis, and he went and ended up winning a championship
they
with Milwaukee, right? So
they signed.
it,
You're right. They signed like 5 or 6 of them, and it was
it
crazy.
was crazy. It was crazy. I mean, you watch the Major League Baseball draft and you see teams draft shortstops, but that makes sense because you can move a shortstop to third base or to the outfield or wherever else. I mean, if you can play shortstop, you can play pretty much every other position. In basketball, okay, they're power forwards and they've already played in the NBA, so they're kind of their skill set may be somewhat limited. Although, as you said, Julius Randle had an incredible year last year. I mean, he averaged over 6 assists a game, double-digit rebounds, around 24, 25 points per game. He was a viable MVP candidate. So,
Yep.
yeah, that's the only thing missing is they don't have the cap space. I also think James Dolan is a turnoff for players because of the way he has treated former Knick players. He even got into a spat with Spike Lee, a few years ago. Obviously, we know what happened with Charles Oakley. He's thrown Knick fans out of the arena for life. I mean, he's obviously a detriment to that organization, but he's the owner. He's not going anywhere. That can't be a good thing to try to recruit free agents. I mean, especially if he's recruiting a free agent and you bring in the owner to seal the deal, and he starts talking about his band that he's in, that players
Yes.
are going to look at him and go, what the hell is this guy talking about?
It's handing
He's
out
supposed to,
CDs.
right. Yeah. He's handing out CDs of his band, and they're probably looking at him
Yeah, like the
going,
guy who's standing outside of Madison Square Garden
well,
hawking CDs.
it kind of reminds me of the funny story that was in the Francona book when they were going to meet Daisuke Matsuzaka. Terry Francona was at like Logan Airport and they were flying him out to LA and he wanted to bring a present for Dice K and he didn't know what to get. And he was at the duty free shop at Logan Airport and he brought a Teddy Bruschi shirt to Dice K Matsuzaka. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, but he's still signed here, but it's almost like wasn't really well thought out. Same thing with James Dolan, but yeah. And Thibodeau's a really good coach. A free agent's going to knock down the door to go play for Tom Thibodeau. So, I mean, okay, maybe Jimmy Butler and that type of hard ass would, but if Kevin Durant's a free agent at the end of next year and says, you know what, I'm just going to move from Brooklyn to Manhattan, but I'm going to play for Tom Thibodeau, that's not going to work. And he's a brilliant coach, but he's also in some way, Buck Showalter, he's like the guy before the guy. Like maybe he creates the culture, and then when it's time to move on and get real players, that he's going to have to be gone.
It just happened in Brooklyn. Kenny Atkinson built the culture, and then those guys ousted him. And now it's Steve Nash, who they can probably just walk all over. I mean, that's why I heard Stephen A. Smith say last week, I don't ask me how I know this, but I know this Dame Lillard, his top pick is going to the Knicks, and he wants to, recruit free agents there. And that's, that's all well and good, but I don't really believe Dame Lillard's top pick is the Knicks, because why would he want to go from a franchise in Portland that's been, stable but not good enough to win a championship to a franchise that's unstable and not good enough to win a championship? It doesn't make any sense. He would want to go to a team that's an immediate contender, not try to build something back up. He's already trying to do that in Portland. He wants to be in a situation that's ready to go, ready-made right now. So I don't really that really took me off guard. Stephen A. Smith saying, the Knicks are his top choice. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And then we hear what Philadelphia did by hiring Phil Beckner, who was an assistant coach at Weber State when Dame Lillard played there and has been a personal trainer, kind of a shot doctor, whatever, for Dame Lillard the last decade, is very close with Dame Lillard. And Philadelphia went out and hired him as a coaching consultant, which would lead you to believe that Philadelphia is trying to make the smart move to put someone in place who Dame Lillard feels comfortable with. So now, the balls could be in motion for that type of thing. And obviously, what do the Knicks have to offer Portland? Is it future draft picks? I mean, they're good enough that they're probably going to make the playoffs, so they're not going to be in the lottery. Those picks aren't going to be all that good, and future draft picks are going to be really worthless if Dame Lillard is now on the Knicks and they're a contending team. Philadelphia has the best package to offer Portland, right? Because Ben Simmons. And other assets. So that's still, I think, let's
talk about that, Sep. The Ben Simmons aspect, the Portland. We've been talking about this for months. We've been on it for months about Portland is the most logical trade destination for Ben Simmons and a Dame Lillard sort of swap. Here's the problem, though, that's going on right now. Every day, Ben Simmons is continuing to torpedo his value. You're getting all these reports. He will not pick up the phone call from the Sixers. He's not working out with the Sixers. All the communication is now coming from his agent, Rich Paul, who's not the most beloved figure amongst NBA front office circles in the league. So not only did he have a horrible playoffs, and does he have these holes in his game that was really being picked apart, but now he's coming across as kind of a diva, non-communicative. If he wants to move, which clearly he does, he's going about it the complete wrong way, because every day he continues to do this, his value is getting worse and worse. And the Blazers are going to go, do we even want to necessarily deal with this guy who, shuts down completely and is unwilling to work on his game, decided to not even play for Team Australia, who put up a valiant effort against Team USA, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, in the Olympics last night. And, is just doing all of his communication through this agent that we don't like already. I don't know that, the Sixers are going to have the easiest time moving him. He's making it really difficult.
No, I mean, we'll talk about another diva who happens to be my favorite football player, Aaron Rodgers. And we know for most of the offseason, we heard the rumors that he wasn't going to go back to Green Bay and he wanted to get traded, although he never said those things. But, people that were used in the media to kind of get his message out talked about that, including Adam Schefter on draft night back in April. But here's the thing, as much as a diva as Aaron Rodgers was during the offseason, he at least spoke with Mark Murphy, the president of the Packers, Brian Gutekunst, the general manager of the Packers, and Matt LaFleur, the head coach of the Packers.
Well, and he's
He
coming
met
off an
with them.
MVP, Sap.
He's the best at what he does, right? And he's worth being a pain in the ass, right? I mean, like, there's
Right.
what he's in the discussion with Mahomes and Brady as the three best quarterbacks in football, and yeah, he's won 3 MVPs, he's won a Super Bowl, he's an all-time great. Ben Simmons, in that postseason series against Philadelphia, felt like a niche player. Like
Rodgers just has had leverage because he won MVP. He was the best player in the league last year. Ben Simmons is coming off arguably the worst stretch in his career.
Right, and at least Rodgers spoke to the president, general manager, and coach. They don't have an owner, but at least he had some communication with them. Now, he may have thrown them all out of his house in Southern California. I don't know. But Ben Simmons isn't even picking up the phone. That's damn frustrating. He's torpedoing his whole value. Like, if you're Portland, like, okay, we're going to trade the most popular player in franchise history for this guy, and there'll be other parts involved there. I don't think it's going to be a 1-for-1 deal because Dame has established himself. Dame's established himself as a top 10, top 15 player in the league easily.
Sure,
Ben
top
Simmons,
10, I would say.
Yeah. Top 10, he's right there. Ben, it could be if he, looked like he gave a fuck about basketball. That's the other thing about Ben Simmons. Like, Dame Lillard is a baller, right? He's in the Olympics. Like, anybody that's at the Olympics right now, I give them credit, especially the 3 guys that played in the finals. I mean, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Devin Booker, especially Booker with a broken nose and his team lost the 2-0 lead to lose the series. I probably would have stayed in bed for a week, obviously considering who Devin Booker probably hangs out in bed with. I probably would too. So I think that I give those guys credit. Those 3 could have said, you know what, we just had a long final series. I'm not going to the other side of the world to play for the United States team. Give them all credit for doing that. Ben Simmons didn't want to represent his own home country of Australia, like you said, and maybe a focused Ben Simmons brings them a gold medal, right? I mean, there's chances are they're going to end up with the bronze medal. They're going to play Slovenia for the gold medal, for the bronze medal. So he's not even into that. I question if the guy likes basketball. He's really good at it, but he doesn't seem to have the passion, the work ethic. I think he has the work ethic in terms of staying in shape, but that's almost kind of like a narcissistic. He hasn't improved his game
one iota since coming into the league.
That's like a narcissistic thing, right? Like, okay, I look good. He's a handsome guy. He's dated a Kardashian. He's impressive to look at. It's almost like some quarterbacks in the NFL. They're in phenomenal shape, but they don't work on their craft in the off season. This is what a basketball player has to do. I mean, we heard the stories, Kobe and Michael Jordan in the offseason would spend hours on their post-up game, and Magic.
You don't have to be that.
Those guys are obviously sociopaths, but at least show a little interest in improving your game. And I haven't seen that from Ben Simmons.
Yeah, so it seems on paper like the most likely trade because Lillard would be a great fit in Philadelphia with Embiid. And Ben Simmons is young and someone you would think you could build around. But the guy, I mean, he might quit in like a year. I don't know. He does, like you said, I don't think he likes basketball.
No.
He's clearly shown he can't be the one on a team. He can't be your best player. And that was what the hope was with him being drafted number 1 overall, that he could be, sort of like a LeBron James, Magic Johnson type, this gigantic point guard.
Right.
I mean, we're bagging on him, and he deserves to be ripped, absolutely. But the guy is supremely skilled, and if he should choose to put in the effort, he could be a dominant player in the NBA. We've seen flashes of it, but he's unwilling to put in the extra work. And this now going AWOL from his team, it's a terrible look. And again, like you said, Sap, and we've mentioned this before. Damian Lillard is the most popular player in Blazers history. If you want to debate if he's the best, I think that's open for discussion. But he's the most popular player. I know that for a fact. I have friends there. I lived there. He's the most popular player in franchise history.
Well, the only other 2 guys, one hasn't played there for 40 years. That was Bill Walton, who delivered the championship. But, I mean, I remember Bill Walton, and I'm 58 years old. You don't. Drexler was a great player as well. And I would debate you that Drexler so far has had a better career than Damian Lillard. Now, in 3 or 4 years, Lillard continues on this ascent. He may go down as the better player than Clyde Drexler. But as far as popular, I mean, first of all, aren't the smaller guys always more popular than the big guys because they're relatable? Like Dame Lillard's like 6'1".
For the most part.
For the most part, you kind of, like when
with the exception of like Shaq,
who's got a personality, right? Like Kareem was put Kareem in the discussion as the greatest player ever. Were kids running around with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar shirts? Probably not. I mean,
and goggles, no,
and goggles and emulating the sky hook, right? I mean, and even today, as great as LeBron is and as popular as he remains the most popular player, the kids really gravitate to the smaller guys like Steph Curry. I think they're going to gravitate to Trae Young, and that's why Dame is so popular. He's 6'1", maybe 6'2". He's got a great personality. He's a fairly accomplished rapper. I mean, Philadelphia would be a perfect city for him, right? I mean, is Meek Mill's out of prison now, so he could, maybe he could rap with Meek Mill and
thanks
get
to Robert Kraft.
Robert Kraft could be part of it too. Bob Kraft could be there rapping with Meek Mill and Damian Lillard. I think it would work.
Yeah, I mean, Philadelphia should really be all hands on deck in terms of trying to do whatever they can to get him there, because I think him and Embiid is a tremendous fit. But Ben Simmons is making it really hard for them to get this thing done. And then you hear about the other option is that, they try to trade Ben Simmons for Bradley Beal, but you're running into the same situation where the Wizards go, well, this guy's been pretty loyal to us. Why do we want to trade for Ben Simmons, who seems like he's not loyal to even his own country? And listen, it's easy for us to say that, he's played basketball for almost 2 years straight. Maybe he just wanted the summer off to recoup and relax and stuff like that.
Right.
You don't get compensated very much for playing in the Olympics. Some guys just do it for free, but it did seem like he could have played for Australia and given them a big lift. At the very least, been working out at the Sixers facility, and for all I know, he's lounging at a beach right now. He's doing nothing.
He's got a beautiful new house that he moved into in Southern California. Yeah, and God knows who he's dating. God bless him. He's got this huge contract. The thing with Simmons. I think Simmons needs to be with someone who can push him. Like, I've compared him to Scottie Pippen somewhat. I mean, I think some of their skill set is similar. Pippen developed into being a good scorer, a good free throw shooter, an accomplished outside shooter. Not great, but dependable. A lot of the rest of their game, very similar. Great defenders, outstanding passers, rebound really well for their position. Somewhat similar. Pippen had Jordan to push him, right? To the point where I think Pippen was scared shit of Michael Jordan, didn't want to disappoint him, and continued to work his ass off to get better and get tougher. There's no one on Philadelphia that's going to do that for Ben Simmons, because Joel Embiid, as talented as he is a bit of a flake, right? I mean, he's got a little bit of Will Chamberlain.
He's a fun-loving guy.
He's a fun-loving guy.
Like a fun-loving guy.
He's not a leader in terms of Ben Simmons is going to walk into the locker room and have the rest of his teammates shit their pants when he walks in, like Michael Jordan did, or Kobe, or the group of sociopaths.
Yeah, he needs like a Kevin Garnett.
Exactly.
Like that.
There's a perfect guy right there. I mean, in some sense, Paul Pierce needed Kevin Garnett, and Paul Pierce was a baller. Like, you knew Paul Pierce loved to play. Like, he would play now. He'd probably still be good in a pickup game. But I think Garnett elevated him because he had that type of personality. That's a great point, Jed. A Garnett type of guy. Like, who in the NBA is that guy? Like, obviously it makes sense to play with LeBron. It would be a weird fit with LeBron because, I mean, how many ball handlers are you going to have? And obviously the Lakers are all set. Plus, he's way too young to be on the Lakers. But my point being, he needs someone. Like, Golden State to me would make some sense, right? Because you got Draymond.
Fit for him. Perfect spot. I love that.
If you're just around Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, you will become more professional. You've got an established culture there. Great coach in Steve Kerr with the front office, ownership, all of that. And then you got Draymond, who could be, the bouncer in the club, who could, get in his face and say, look, you're 6 inches taller than me. You're way more talented. What the hell are you doing out here? That's the perfect spot for him. And they got a lot of assets, right? I mean, they had 2 high draft picks. You've got you've got the assets to do it. So maybe that's the best place, not Portland.
Yeah, I think it's the best fit, because I think that if Ben Simmons goes there, he's the third scoring option, sometimes the fourth scoring option. Right. So he doesn't have to feel nearly as much pressure. He's a great distributor. We know that. It takes some of the ball handling pressure off Steph Curry, who doesn't, need to have the pressure taken off him because he's such an outstanding ball handler, but it makes him even more dangerous. And then you have, the Draymond, Ben Simmons defense aspect. I think it would make them a legitimate title contender.
Absolutely. I mean,
if he goes to that team, and it's a lot to give up. Listen, Philadelphia would make out like gangbusters in that trade, because they'd probably ask for, the whole haul of Wiseman and Kuminga and Moses Moody and
maybe Andrew
whoever the
Wiggins,
hell
because
else.
the contracts have
Wiggins,
to work,
right?
right?
They
So
need
be Andrew
Wiggins
Wiggins.
would have to go too. So it would be a haul, but also that puts Philadelphia in a weird situation where then what are they rebuilding suddenly? So they
Right.
maybe need to get a third team involved in that trade that is willing to start the rebuild. And Golden State has a lot of good pieces to help expedite a
Sure.
rebuild, but it doesn't work for Golden State right now because they're trying to win now. And it doesn't really work for Philadelphia because they're also trying to win right now. So the fit makes sense because Ben Simmons, I think, would be tremendous on Golden State and they would vault them into serious title contention. I think the Lakers would be very upset to see that trade go down. But
Yeah, because it makes them legitimate contenders.
They'd almost have to get a third team involved, right, Seth? Because
Yeah.
I don't think Philadelphia is interested in having all these young pieces to go with Joel
Well,
Embiid. I think they're looking at
Wiggins.
it. Let's compete now.
Well, Wiggins played with Embiid at Kansas. I don't know what their relationship was or is. He's
Right.
a solid player. He's not an all-star caliber player, but he's become a good 3-and-D guy, right? A nice piece on a contending team.
He's fine.
He's solid. Wiseman, now you've added a big guy, which works in Philadelphia because Embiid likes being a mid-range shooter. He's a phenomenal mid-range shooter. He doesn't have to play in the low blocks like Shaq or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He likes facing the basket. So Wiseman could be someone that could kind of fit in with him. And then you've got two very young players. Again, that makes it look like Philadelphia is still contending, but rebuilding at the same time. I know that sounds weird to say that, but yeah, because
but how long until Wiseman's ready to actually contribute
right
to winning basketball?
And of course, Embiid, he's always a factor because of his health. Like I don't know, I don't picture Joel Embiid exactly, approaching games played in his career a la Robert Parrish or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I don't see that happening. So that's obviously another issue. Plus, Simmons would be perfect in Northern California. And I'm not trying to put everybody into stereotypes. Philadelphia is a blue collar, that's why they loved Allen Iverson, right? Because Allen Iverson busted his ass every moment on the court. He was tough, 5'10", maybe 160 pounds, maybe got tossed around like a rag doll every time he went to the basket and bounced up. They loved him because he was that tough. Ben Simmons ain't that, but in Northern California, that may work. So even for the dynamic of it off the court, Ben Simmons to Golden State makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I think Golden State, they're a pretty smart franchise, and I would hope that they would realize that even with Klay Thompson coming back, say he's 100%, he's not going to be, but say he is, the age, the time that's passed between him and Curry and Draymond playing together and being in their primes. Curry's still in his prime. Draymond's not anymore.
No.
I don't think that they, as currently constituted, are a title contender. Will they be better than last year? Yeah, of course they will. But if you add Ben Simmons to that core, then you're a title contender. So I would think that they would look at the ages of their players and what they want to do and say, hey, we have a window here of probably like 3 years with Curry now to try to win another championship or two. Ben Simmons puts us in that position, and then give up maybe what would be a very rich package of young players. We'll see. I agree with you. I think it's the best fit. I think it's something that may need to have, again, a third team involved, because I don't know what Philadelphia really is looking for in return for Ben Simmons. Obviously, they would love to do just a Lillard for Simmons swap, but that's just not going to happen. So they have to get a little more creative.
Yeah, maybe you get Portland or Washington involved because they have star players in Lillard and Beal. So maybe that works, and then the contracts kind of match up. So there's a lot. I mean, we're just in the start of free agency. A lot's happened, but a lot still will happen. There'll be moves made because I can't see Ben Simmons going back to Philadelphia. His best teammate or best player on his team, I wouldn't call him his best teammate because I don't think they really like each other, but Embiid threw him under the bus after the Game 7 loss to Atlanta, and the coach did too. So, and he seems like a guy who doesn't really care about basketball, and the fans, he just doesn't fit in Philadelphia. Like Embiid kind of fits in Philadelphia because he's quirky, so he's got kind of this personality, but the fans would turn on him quickly too. I'm sure there's a bunch of fans that aren't pleased that Embiid isn't always in the best of shape. I mean, you think Boston is a rough sports city. Philadelphia is way worse. I mean, they will just crucify you. They love tough guys, and that's why they loved Iverson. And, that's why they were, great fans of the Philadelphia Flyers. And when that team won Stanley Cups back in the 70s, they were physical, tough, fighting teams. They like that. Ben
And
Simmons doesn't fit
Simmons has
in.
sort of been a
Oh, my.
shield for Embiid in some ways, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. Maybe Embiid should just, make sure that he comes back and they work together because, if you're getting mad at Ben Simmons, you don't have time to get mad at Joel Embiid, because if Simmons is gone and it doesn't work out, this is all going to fall on Embiid, because by his comments after Game 7, you would think that he wants him out of there. It's a mess there in Philadelphia. The process obviously has not worked the way it was intended.
Yeah, so I think, we'll see what happens with Simmons. I agree with you. I don't think he's going back to Philadelphia. I mean, he won't even talk to them. So it seems like that's very unlikely to happen. But it's not as simple of a trade as it was, prior to the postseason and now prior to this offseason, where he's just torpedoed his value further. He's made it much more complicated for them.
Yep.
So we'll have to see what happens there. Not similar, but same vein, Bradley Beal. We don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
There's some rumors that he might request a trade. He's a free agent next year. There's also rumors that he really loves Spencer Dinwiddie, who they just signed for 3 years, I think $60 million, and that he's happy with Dinwiddie. So I don't really know what to make of that situation, Sap. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about your guy
Sure.
LeBron?
Absolutely. Why it
All
would
right.
not be a pick and roll NBA podcast
Without
without
right?
talking about LeBron. I mean, there's and a Aaron Rodgers reference somehow. I wedged him in too.
Or usually a Kevin Durant feud, but he's too busy at the Olympics right now carrying Team USA to be feuding with anybody.
Or in my case, a reference that he is the greatest scorer the sport's ever seen, which I think he's proving at the Olympic Games when really no one's really helping him, and he's got his team playing in the gold medal game.
Yeah, we'll finish off the show talking about the Olympics and U.S. Going for the gold in a day. But let's talk about this LeBron tweet that he has since deleted. He tweeted this out the other day, Sap. Keep talking about my squad, our personal ages, the way they play. We're past our time in this league, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do me a favor, please. And I mean, please, prayer hands emoji. Keep that same narrative energy when it begins. That's all I ask. Hashtag thank you. And then the crown emoji. And he deleted that. Sap. This is the ultimate straw man of straw man arguments, and why I think he deleted it. It's the same thing he did a couple of years ago, where he was saying, all these people are saying I'm washed up. Well, look at me now. No one was saying he's washed up. Yeah, people are making fun of the Lakers' age, but everyone's also saying, they're the favorites in the West, maybe the favorites in the NBA. So this was just him building a straw man. I think got completely called out for it and deleted it.
I think he deleted it so people would talk about him deleting it, right? I mean, he has 50 million followers. It's not by him deleting it.
You know the guy better than I do.
Well, yeah, we're 50 million followers. We're going to talk about it, right? He's a master of this, though. Seriously. And Brady's starting to get a little bit better at this stuff, too, because now he's on social media since he left the Patriots and was allowed to be a human, not a cyborg. So LeBron is a master of this, right? So he deletes it. So we now put that into the story. I think what he's doing here is he's trying to create an us versus them mentality, which the all-time greats have always done that, right? Michael Jordan saw enemies where they didn't exist. Kobe Bryant saw enemies where they didn't exist. Tom Brady certainly sees enemies where they don't exist. LeBron's a little different than them. I've always called those three guys sociopaths. LeBron's not, but I think he's trying to learn to build that us versus them mentality. So he's just covering his guys' asses by saying, look, everyone thinks we're old, which we all admit they're old. We had all the jokes out in the last podcast that, they've got 5 guys that could run for president of the United States and 3 more guys that could run for the U.S. Senate. They're calling them the Golden Boys, whatever the case may be. Like Russell Westbrook is I believe, 8th oldest guy on the team, and he's 32 and he's been around forever, right? The only guy really in their prime on the Lakers right now is Anthony Davis, who's not very durable. But I think he's putting this out there, LeBron, to just show his teammates, I've got it. And he puts the pressure on himself so that those guys can go play basketball. Look, it is a straw man argument. I think everyone now looks at the Lakers as a prohibitive favorite to win the West. And we're sitting here in August, and we expect next June or whenever the finals will be, that it's going to be Lakers Nets. again, provided both teams are fairly healthy. It's a straw man argument that he's created here. He does it a lot, but I think he does it somewhat to motivate himself, but also to kind of show that he's got his teams back, and that, while everyone is saying they're old, he has confidence in them that they're going to band together and win a championship.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, Sep, is that, of course, everybody was joking about how old they were, and, he was bringing that up. But then the second part is, okay, well, they were also really, really good.
Right.
And like I said, the prohibitive favorites. So, that tweet was missing that whole aspect of it, too. And, even if they do win the whole thing, people are going to still say, oh, wow, this is the oldest team to win it or something like that.
Right.
It's not that they're saying they can't win it because they're old. They're just pointing out a fact. They're old. So yeah, it's obviously a straw man argument, and like you said, maybe he deleted it, Sap, to get even more conversation about it.
Sure.
But it's just like, I mean, other players do this, of course. He does it a lot, as does Tom Brady, and the Patriots were famous for doing this during their dynasty run of saying no one believes in us, even though they would lose no games in a regular season or one game in a regular season. No one believes in us. And so, it's whatever gets you motivated. I think it's a little silly, because does LeBron really need to get, a team full of hungry veterans motivated? Probably not. They're probably, ready to go. Carmelo's never even played in the finals, for Christ's sake. I'm sure he's highly motivated. We know Russell Westbrook's insanely motivated when he's playing in a regular season game against, the Charlotte Hornets. He's highly motivated. Right. So I don't think he has to do this.
Did you see one of his workouts recently? One of
Westbrook?
his workouts. I mean, the guy is he's just, I maintain he's the best athlete in the NBA. And I've said this before he got to the Lakers, so I'm not just, sidling up to him.
You think Ben Simmons works out like him?
Oh, well, see, I think Ben Simmons works out because he's vain. Russell Westbrook works out. First of all, Russell Westbrook's a good looking dude too, right? He's like I've always compared Russell Westbrook to Cam Newton. Like,
he's the fashion icon of the NBA.
Absolutely. A good looking dude, likable off the court. On the court, he kind of, infuriates me with some of his decision making. Maybe he'll tone it down a little bit with LeBron. He tried to tone it down when he played the 1 year with Harden, right? That was the only year he didn't average a triple-double. And here's a guy who gets criticized for averaging a triple-double, which there's some validity to that. He's fighting his own teammates for rebounds. Like, on a missed free throw shot, let your big guy get a rebound. Maybe instead of 11 rebounds, he gets 12 or 13 for the game, the big guy. And that's kind of what the big guys want, is rebounds. But he plays his ass off. So he's so motivated and competitive that you do like that. But yeah, as far as working out, I mean, the guy, I maintain you put him in the NFL, he'd be a hell of a wide receiver, a cornerback. Give him a football, he'd throw it perfectly. Give him a golf club, he'd be damn good at that. And he's the perfect size. Like, if I could wake up as an athlete, it would probably be him, because he's like 6'3", 200 pounds. Like, I don't want to be 6'9", 260 like LeBron. He kind of stands out. But 6'3", 200 pounds, you're tall, but you're not gigantic, and then you go out and you dominate on the playground.
You can still fit in the cars, and don't have to duck your head under.
And you're a good
doorways.
looking guy, and you got the fashion, and he seems like he's happily married with the kids, and he's socially conscious, right? So I mean, personally, I love him, I do, but on the court, I hope he fits in. LeBron's going to have to adapt, but that's the right guy to adapt. But back to the tweet that LeBron since deleted. Yeah, I mean, it's not like we were all going to miss this when he deleted it. It was out there. And also, it's kind of like the Rodney Harrison vibe. I remember going into the 2005 season, the Patriots came off the back-to-back Super Bowl wins, Jed. They were 34-4 over a 2-year period, won back-to-back Super Bowls, and he's talking about no one believes in us. But that's how he got himself motivated and tried to get his team motivated. It's an old trick. The Celtics did it with Auerbach. Everybody does it. So I get it.
And LeBron did it, like I said, 2 years ago, right? Where you kept using to say, everybody's saying, I'm washed.
Washed king.
Well, no one said that. Yep. Everybody said you were the best player in the NBA still.
Maybe he only listens to Skip Bayless, and whenever Skip Bayless says something, he reacts to it. He doesn't listen to anybody else. Well, the only thing
is, if he just listens to Skip, that's plenty of motivation.
I mean, Skip is still active on Twitter, but he and Shannon have been on vacation the last 2 weeks, which, there's really never a good time to take vacation in this business, because there's always something happening, especially in basketball. There's it's 365 days a year.
Even when he's on vacation.
Yeah.
He was tweeting about how Team USA had no chance to come back from down 15 points to us. I mean, whatever he tweets, it ends up being wrong, which is, entertaining also.
And then he has the tweet where, KD, and then he has like 106 greater than signs, and then LBJ. It's like, okay, Skip, we get the point.
Okay.
You think Kevin Durant's better than LBJ. But speaking of Kevin Durant, he now, if they win one more game, is going to be the most decorated Olympian ever, right? You think he'll surpass Carmelo because they'll each have 3 gold medals for gold medals, but he's got more points.
Him because he's the scoring. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. He'd be the most decorated Olympian. He'll tie Carmelo for the most golds in Team USA history, and he has already since broken his scoring record. So yeah, and Sap, to end the show, we'll talk about this Olympics thing. Durant has been, far and away their team's best player. Of a team full of NBA All-Stars and All-NBA players. He stood out as clearly the best player on the team and has kept them the past 2 games. Has kept them afloat. Last night, I love these. By the way, I love these 12:45 p.m. games. It's perfect for me.
It's perfect. You're just
do late night.
Yeah, you're right. You're right in your strength right there. That's perfect for you.
Exactly. So I was. I'm up taking
I'm up taking my second piss of the night.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. But I'm, closely watching what was happening in those games. Is especially the start. These other teams have great chemistry. Team USA doesn't have great chemistry. They have great players. And so these other teams start the games off really well. And Team USA falls from behind. Nobody can hit shots except for Kevin Durant, who it can hit shots if you wake him up in the middle of the night and put a basketball in his hands. He'll hit a shot. It's like, a great golfer. You can recreate the swing whenever. He can recreate the shot whenever he wants. Doesn't matter. He's automatic. And so the other teams will basically do everything they can to build a big lead. And Kevin Durant will keep the team alive until about the third quarter when the rest of Team USA decides to wake up. And then they start to storm back. And then by the end of it, they're up by 20 points. But Durant's been the best player for Team USA. He's been the second best player in the Olympics to Luka Doncic, who, basically almost dragged his team to the gold medal round. He lost by 1 point to France. And he was dragging, real stiffs. It's a country of 2 million people, Slovenia, Sap, and he brought them within a point of a gold medal game.
He had a triple-double, right? He had 18 assists. Now, he injured his hand, so he wasn't shooting all that well and didn't really want to shoot. The last play of the game, he didn't shoot, set up a layup, which
he passed,
he passed, and Nicolas Batum ended up with the block to save the game for France. So, Luka had been healthy and been able to do what Luka normally does. They probably win that game, right? Because they lose by 1 point, and he was not very efficient scoring because of that hand injury. Yeah, the guy, he's phenomenal. But what Durant's doing is spectacular. And it sometimes it'll be not overlooked, but underrated because it's like, okay, it's the United States. They should win the gold medal. But he's the one guy that's been consistent throughout all of this, which is not a surprise. He's, like you said, Jet, he could take 6 months off. He didn't play basketball for nearly 2 years and came back and was still the most unstoppable scorer in this league.
Yeah. He's amazing.
It's like, I remember
one of him as a personality because he's a weird guy, but his basketball skill it's beyond repute. It's remarkable to watch.
I remember years ago, Dan Marino was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he threw a pass to Mark Duper, who was one of his great receivers for the Dolphins. And Marino probably hadn't thrown a football in 5 years, and he was in a sport jacket, the gold sport jacket that you wear at the induction, and he threw a spiral like 40 yards right into Mark Duper's hands. It's like, these are freaks. There's just maybe 5 guys in the history of football that could throw the football like Dan Marino. I've said this to the point where I'm going to have this on my tombstone. There's never been a player like Kevin Durant. I don't really know of any player in the history of the sport who's that much of an elite shooter and an elite scorer. Normally you're one or the other. Like Jordan was an elite scorer, but not necessarily an elite shooter. Kobe, the same thing. Steph Curry to me is an elite shooter, but not necessarily an elite shooter because he's a scorer because he's only 6'3". This guy's elite at both. If he just wanted to shoot threes all day, he'd be unstoppable. Or if he just wanted to post up or drive to the basket, he'd be unstoppable. He's got it all. And they've needed him too, Chad, right?
Team USA, saved their ass the past 2 games against Spain and against last night against Australia. Saved them.
Who's been the second best player? It's probably Drew Holiday, right?
Drew Holiday or Draymond Green's been outstanding too.
He does what he does, which is great.
He's not scoring.
But
he's been outstanding. He's a perfect Olympian player. He's perfect for this type of thing.
Perfect guy. And Holiday too, right? Because he's going to bring defense. I think
Holiday's been outstanding too.
Yeah.
Tatum's
give
been
him
good
credit.
too.
You think now that's Tatum. I know he's so frustrating. I always expect more from him, but so be it. And I know Devin Booker's wearing a headband, which I don't like. Good looking dude like that
Yeah,
doesn't need to wear a headband. But no, I give Booker, Middleton, and Holiday a ton of credit. They could have all just bowed out of this. And even Durant, I mean, he
sure.
lost in round 2 coming off the injuries, a heartbreaking loss to the Bucks in the second round. And look, the one thing I'll give Kevin Durant credit for, he loves playing basketball. He's like the complete opposite of Ben Simmons. I don't know if Durant works on his body much in the offseason. It doesn't look it, but he doesn't have to. He has the
Doesn't
right
matter.
metabolism.
Yeah.
He's never going to put a pound on. I hate those guys. But as far as his game, he just loves playing basketball. He's kind of in a Paul Pierce way. Like, I think, at 50 years old, Durant will probably just be out there, hey, is there a game in town I want to play? He just loves playing basketball. And you know what? If I was that good, I would too.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't blame him. I mean, he's outstanding. But yeah, listen, I think everybody knew going into this Olympics, Team USA, it wasn't as strong of a team as
right.
past because of COVID, and they hadn't had much practice time, and it was a completely revamped squad from the past couple of Olympics, new coach and everything. So it was going to be a feeling out process. They obviously had the best talent because the United States still has the most talent. But you've seen some of the flaws in that these other teams have played together for years and years and years and years. And these guys all know each other for Team USA, but none of them play together. And it takes somebody like Durant to be able to say, okay, it doesn't matter if we have chemistry. I'm just going to put the ball in the basket and figure out the chemistry on the fly. I'll keep us alive until other guys start shooting shots. And that's what he's done the past 2 games, which have happened to be, elimination games. So he deserves a ton of credit. The gold medal game is tomorrow against France, the team that beat them, the only team that's beat them so far in this tournament. And it should be a pretty good game. I would think Team USA would be able to beat them now that they've seen them once and scouted them out. The best players on France are Fournier, Batum, and Rudy Gobert. They have, NBA guys on it. They have a couple of ex-Celtics who are really great Celtics. Vincent Poirier and Gershon Yabusele, tremendous careers in the NBA for the Celtics. But Team USA should be able to beat them and beat them handily. I would also expect a similar sort of field as the last 2 games. Maybe Team USA starts out slow, Durant keeps them alive, then they heat up. It doesn't matter if they fall behind because they won't ever fall way too far behind because Durant won't let them. And then other guys they're too talented to brick. If one guy's bricking all game, you just sub in another guy and he'll presumably get hot. That's what happened the other night against Spain. Jason Tatum was the guy who was hot. Last night it was Devin Booker who was hot. Mm-hmm. So you just need Durant and then a couple supplementary things, and they should win a gold medal. I think that they'll win it this year.
Yeah, they should, especially after they lost to France in the kickoff game of the Olympics. So they're going to be focused. And they're playing better in stretches. It's amazing, Jet, because probably for 60% of that game, they were outplayed by Australia. But the 40% or even less than that, maybe 30% where they outplayed Australia, they really outplayed them. I mean, it almost has a feel of what Golden State did when they had Durant, Curry, and Klay Thompson. Like you'd hang in there for a half and you'd be, maybe up 3 or 4 points at the half and go, wow, we're really in this game. And then voomf, the third quarter comes and you're done. And then that's the feel that you get. And Kevin Durant's the main reason why. And then again, what's wrong with having, Damian Lillard is your second best player and Tatum and Booker. And then you got those glue guys like Holiday, Middleton, and like you said, Draymond, who just
LaVine was excellent last night too. I forgot to shout him out. Zach LaVine played tremendous last night.
Good player. I like the moves the Bulls made. And I think he's good. And I think they're getting a little bit away from the Popovich system. Like I never thought Popovich was the right coach for this team. First of all, he's old and cranky at this point. And I also think that the college coach works better in the Olympic setup because the college coach, especially the high-level college coaches, whether it's Coach K or Coach Calipari, they're used to the one-and-dones when you kind of throw a team together and it has to work right away. That's kind of what you get in the Olympics. And I think that, Popovich probably for 2024, I don't know who's going to be the head coach by then. He'll be 75 or 76. I'd go back to a college coach. I really would because I think they can handle these things better than a pro coach in terms of, flying by the seat of their pants because they do so many with one-and-dones.
Yeah, on the staff is also Steve Kerr, who I think is a good person to balance out Popovich's temperament, and Jay Wright, who is a college coach, who's coach at Villanova. Though Villanova, as great of a program as they are, doesn't really get the star recruits. So I don't know
Same
that
thing with Izzo.
But yeah, it'll be I don't think Popovich will coach this team in 4 years again. I think this was his one thing, and I think none of the coaches get compensated. They're doing this for free for pride. And Popovich obviously is a very, very proud American, was in the armed forces. And, he's a very outspoken and a liberal guy, but you can be liberal and be very pro-America. I don't know why that's gotten lost in translation.
Right. Yeah, great point, Chad. That is a great point. Yeah. I mean, we're both pretty liberal, and we're both pro-America. It's almost like we're so pro-America that sometimes we criticize it, which is okay. You criticize members of your family. Neither one of us are parents right now. I think
that's the most pro-America thing you can do is be realistic about.
Yeah, I mean, if look,
and that's what Popovich is. He didn't take a knee during the national anthem. He still had his hand over his heart. He loves his country, but he'll rip President Trump for things he doesn't think is right because you have the freedom of speech to do that, and I think that's very pro-America.
Our parents loved us, right? But they would criticize us if we did something wrong.
Sure.
If they hadn't, we'd turn out to be spoiled brats that never knew the difference between right and wrong. Yeah, I've never understood that. I think Calipari would be a great choice because Calipari's he's a great recruiter, which in some sense you probably have to recruit a little bit to do this, but also he's really good at you put these one and done guys together for 1 year and he gets the most out of them. I think he'd be a fantastic. Players love him, and like half the league is Kentucky players. Like if Calipari's coaching, that Booker's going, or maybe Karl Anthony Towns going, although maybe you don't want Karl Anthony Towns going. Yeah, so you get Anthony Davis may show up again. Durant's gonna probably play again because he just likes playing basketball. So
I think he might.
Calipari, I would think. Pitino, maybe not as much. Pitino also, did he not coach?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. He's a little older. I still maintain, though, that Rick Pitino is the best X and O coach in college basketball. And I've talked to, I've talked to, you remember Tom Keegan, our good friend who was with us at the Boston Herald?
Sure.
And I've talked to him on many times. In fact, we hopefully will start up the, Get Off My Lawn podcast soon when I figure out how to handle the technical aspect of it, because I'm really good at that stuff. But he's very close with Bill Self, who's the coach at Kansas. And Bill Self, and I text one time that with Tom, I said, I think Pitino, this was during the tournament, I think Pitino's the best X&O college coach in basketball. And he said, who would agree with you is Bill Self. And Bill Self's an outstanding coach. I think Pitino's the best X&O coach in college basketball. But I think Calipari's like the best salesman, best recruiter. Coach K's kind of a little bit of both, and he's going to be retiring after next year. But I think Izzo and Wright are both great coaches, but they don't get the star recruits all the time. And you see a lot of those, they're built on culture and players staying there 2 or 3 years. Like I'm surprised you never was. Obviously you went to Oregon, so you have to be an Oregon fan. I'm surprised you never became a Michigan State fan. That's like the perfect team for you.
I did. I really liked Michigan State. I mean, I did, growing up, I really liked them too.
Larry Nassar, notwithstanding, and some of the crazy stuff that's happened.
But I like their basketball program. Like Mateen Cleaves was fantastic. Back in the late '90s, early 2000s. Draymond, sure, they've had Zach Randolph. They've had a bunch of really players that I liked a lot.
No, they have all those guys. I mean, like I'm surprised Marcus Smart didn't end up there. Like that would have been he went to Oklahoma State, which is a very viable program as well. But he would have been the perfect Michigan State. I mean, they practice like a football team. But that would be my choice. Would be Calipari. And look, Pop to me is one of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport without question. And he's kind of facing a little pushback now, a la Belichick. Because it's like, well, what did Pop win without Duncan? Like, what has Belichick won without Brady? But I mean, name me a coach that won without someone, right? Like Red Auerbach wasn't winning championships till Bill Russell showed up.
It's
a player's sport.
Symbiotic relationship. Yeah, you're never going to win without any talent, and talent, for the most part, isn't going to win without solid coaching. You need both. And obviously in football, it's a little bit more important to have the coaching than basketball, but it's still important in basketball. It rears its head a lot in the playoffs is where you see the coaching. So we'll see, but Team USA goes for gold tomorrow, 10:30 p.m. Eastern against France. Hopefully they get the job done. I don't think that the Team USA would like to have to hear about France beating them twice in the same tournament for the next couple of years. And a silver medal will be meaningless to those guys on Team USA.
Yeah.
They are not there for that.
No.
Like if Slovenia wins the bronze or Australia, it'll be the first time either of those countries have medaled.
Right.
And they're playing for the bronze. They'll be thrilled with a bronze. Thrilled.
Sure.
Team USA will throw the silver medals in the trash. I mean, that's what that means to those players. I mean, it's unfortunate that that's the situation, but when you're having the best players in the world congregated on one team, you're expected to win gold. So we'll see what happens, Sap. And I think that's going to do it for us. And we'll be back next week with more NBA news, free agency trades, recap what happens in the gold medal game, recap what happens in the bronze medal game. Well, I'll watch that too. Why not, Sap?
Yep.
So we will talk to you next week, and make sure you find our podcast wherever podcasts are found. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Just type that in and you will find our show. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/JetStryer. You can find me on Twitter at JetStryer and Sap on Twitter at JohnSap25. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. Thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you later.